She didn't have much, just a small-town classroom, a tired smile, and a heart that couldn't ignore a hungry child. One simple meal, one quiet act of kindness, and then he vanished. But years later, that same orphan boy returned, no longer lost, but as a billionaire. Now, are you ready? Go ahead, fix yourself a warm cup of coffee or tea. Take a seat, and let's discover this truly remarkable story together. It began with a Monday morning, one of those still quiet ones you only get in Texas, where the heat hasn't yet climbed and the cicadas are still dreaming. The world looked calm, but fate was already moving. Grace Thompson, 45 years old, had just moved to the little town of Redwood. Widow. Teacher. Mama to a daughter who still believed her mama could fix anything. Grace wasn't looking for adventure or miracles, just peace. A place to start over, a classroom to call her own. After losing her husband to cancer and watching her life in Houston slowly shrink under bills and broken memories, she took the only job left on the state board, a third-grade position in a dusty old school that hadn't seen new paint since the Clinton administration. That morning she dressed with care, ironed her blouse, pinned back her graying curls, and packed a homemade sandwich her daughter Joyce slipped into a paper sack with a sticky note that read, "You're still the best teacher I know." At 7:53 a.m. she stepped onto school grounds, gravel crunching under her loafers, the flag barely lifted in the breeze, and that's when she saw him, a boy, thin, small, standing like a misplaced shadow next to the gate. His shirt was 2 sizes too big. His jeans had holes where knees should have been. His sneakers, duct-taped at the toes, told a story nobody had asked to hear. Grace paused. Something in her mother's heart pulled tight. "Morning, sweetheart," she said gently. "You lost?" The boy didn't answer. Just stared down at the ground. "You here for school?" He shrugged, then after a long pause whispered, "Ain't going in." "They'll laugh again. My clothes. I'm hungry. Ain't eaten since Friday." Grace blinked. Her throat tightened. Friday, and this was Monday. No child should be hungry that long. Not in her class. Not in her town. Not on her watch. She offered a small smile. "Let's fix that." First things first. Breakfast. She didn't ask for permission, just motioned her hand. "Come on." "There's a little diner down the road. 2 eggs, biscuit, sausage. Sound good?" He hesitated, then nodded. They walked in silence toward Mabel's diner, 2 blocks down Main. No one watching them could have known, but that walk would change everything. Because by sundown, the boy would vanish, and the woman who fed him would become a suspect in a town that didn't yet know her name. They walked slow down Main Street, a woman and a boy, in the golden hush of early morning. Grace's hand rested gently on Eli's back, steadying more than just his steps. She didn't say much, didn't need to. The silence between them was filled with something sacred, the kind of quiet that only happens between 2 souls who've both known loss. Just minutes ago, Eli had stood at the school gate, starving, shamed, and ready to vanish. Now, for the first time in a long time, someone had looked him in the eye and seen him. Mabel's diner came into view. A little red brick building tucked between a barber shop and a dry cleaner, its windows fogged with history. Inside smelled like buttered biscuits and old coffee, the kind of smell that clings to your coat and comforts your bones. The bell above the door jingled as Grace stepped in with Eli. "Morning, Dot," Grace called to the waitress behind the counter, a sturdy woman with sky-blue eyeshadow and a voice like a chainsaw wrapped in velvet. "Grace?" Dot blinked. "You're early. Got a young man with me today. He could use some breakfast." Dot raised an eyebrow but nodded, motioning them toward a booth by the window. Eli sat stiff as a fence post, his hands folded tight, eyes scanning every corner of the room. Grace could feel the tension rolling off him like heat off Texas asphalt. "You're safe here," she said softly. "Ain't nobody gonna bother you now." She ordered for him, scrambled eggs, sausage patties, grits with cheese, and a biscuit. "And chocolate milk if you got it." Dot gave a small smile. "You're spoiling him." "Some folks need a little spoilin'," Grace replied. When the food came, Eli didn't speak. He just ate, fast, like he hadn't had a hot meal in days. Grace didn't interrupt. She let him fill the silence with fork and spoon, his face slowly coming back to life with every bite. When the plate was clean, he looked up. For the first time his eyes met hers, and in them something flickered. Not fear, not shame, just thanks. That was real good, ma'am, he whispered. You call me Grace, she said with a smile, and I'm glad you liked it. A pause hung in the air, heavy and unsure. Then Eli said, I can't go to school like this. Why not, baby? My clothes. They'll laugh. Last time they did, one of them threw my backpack in the toilet. Grace clenched her jaw, then softened. Okay, let's fix that too. She reached into her purse, counted out a few bills, just enough for a shirt, some jeans, and socks, and stood. You wait right here. I'll run to the bank, grab a little more. Then we'll go to the thrift store and get you fixed up proper. You'll walk into school like you own the place. Eli nodded, eyes wide with something close to hope. I'll wait, he promised. Grace smiled. Good. You sit tight. She walked out with purpose, shoulders squared, heart light for the first time in months. She didn't know it yet, but that would be the last time she'd see him. Back inside, Eli waited. For a minute, then 2, then 5. The chocolate milk sat half empty, the booth still warm. Eli looked around. The diner hummed, soft voices, clinking plates, smells of cinnamon and bacon. But his hands began to shake, his heart beat faster, and that old voice crept in, the one that told him good things don't last. He stood, looked back once, then walked out the side door, quiet, quick, and gone. When Grace returned, the booth was empty. She checked the restroom, asked Dot. Walked around the block twice, waited, hoped. But Eli was nowhere. That night, Grace sat on her porch, untouched tea in her lap, stars spinning slowly above. I tried, she whispered. Lord knows I tried. Joyce came out and sat beside her. He's just scared, Mama. You did the right thing. Grace nodded, but her heart was heavy. Because something deep down told her, this wasn't over, and she was right. The next morning, just after the first bell rang, a truck roared into the school parking lot, tires squealing, door slamming hard. A man stomped out, fists clenched, voice already rising. Where is he? Where's my boy? Grace froze. Roy Johnson, Eli's uncle. You, he shouted, pointing at Grace. You were the last one seen with him. Now he's gone. I helped him, Grace said. He was hungry. You took him, Roy barked. You think you're better than us? You think you can just steal him away and get away with it? And just like that, whispers turned to stares, stares turned to judgment. And the teacher who fed a hungry boy was about to become the center of a storm. The parking lot fell silent, except for the heavy breathing of Roy Johnson, fists clenched like he meant to punch the air itself. Teachers stood frozen. Parents shielded their children's ears. Grace? She just stood there, her heart thudding in her chest like a drum at a funeral. I didn't take him, she said softly. I fed him, that's all. Fed him? Roy snapped. Fed him what? Lies? Where is he, huh? Where's Eli? The principal stepped between them, raising his hands. Mr. Johnson, I need you to calm down. This is not the place. Oh, it's exactly the place, Roy growled. Y'all brought her into this school, gave her access to our kids, and now mine's gone. Grace's face went pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but her voice had dried up, like someone had wrung her soul through a dish rag. He was hungry, she finally managed. I gave him breakfast, and promised to get him clean clothes. He said he'd wait. But when I came back, he was gone. Gone? Roy sneered. You expect me to believe that? My nephew don't just disappear. Somebody took him, and I say it was you. The principal tried again, this time firmer. Mr. Johnson, we'll open a missing person report, but slandering a teacher. Go ahead, Roy barked. Open it. I'm heading straight to the sheriff. You people are going to regret letting that woman near our children. And with that, he turned, boots stomping gravel, leaving a cloud of dust and suspicion behind him. Grace didn't cry. Not yet. But inside, something cracked. She walked slowly back into the school, whispers trailing her like cigarette smoke. That's her, the new teacher. Did you hear what happened? By noon, she was sitting in the principal's office. Again, hands trembling around a lukewarm cup of coffee. "Tell me everything," the principal said. Word for word, she did. Every step, every word Eli said, every bite he took. The smile, the promise, the empty booths. When she finished, the principal leaned back, rubbing his temples. "You should have reported it the moment he disappeared," he said. "I didn't think—" Grace started. "That's the problem," he interrupted. "In this town, folks don't wait to think." As if on cue, 2 sheriff deputies stepped into the office, one tall, one short, both serious. "Grace Thompson," the taller one said, showing a badge. "We'd like to ask you a few questions." "Of course," she said, standing up. "I want to help. You can do that down at the station." The walk out felt longer than it was. Kids peeked from classroom windows. Parents paused in the hallway, and in that small town way, news had already traveled. By the time she sat in the metal chair inside the sheriff's office, the whole county probably knew. The room was cold, bare walls, flickering light. A fan that buzzed like it had a grudge. "So," the officer said, pulling out a notepad, "tell us about the boy." Again Grace repeated everything, slow, steady. This time she added more. How Eli's shoes had duct tape, how he barely touched his milk. How his voice cracked when he said, "They'll laugh at me." "Sounds like you pitied him," one officer said. "I cared," Grace replied. "Enough to take him?" he shot back. "No," she whispered. "I would never." Hours passed. The questions circled like vultures. Why didn't you call his family? Why didn't you alert the school? Why take him off school property? Each answer only seemed to deepen the hole she was standing in. Finally, they let her sit alone. She folded her arms, trying to keep warm, her back stiff from the chair, her spirit heavier than it had been in years. And then came the twist of the knife. Roy came back, with a story. He didn't just accuse Grace of kidnapping. No, now she was a ritualist, a witch, someone involved in dark practices. "I heard things," he told the sheriff. "She don't even go to church. She talks to kids alone, got weird drawings in her classroom." It was nonsense, but in a town like Redwood, nonsense travels faster than facts. And by the next morning, Grace Thompson, once the new teacher with a kind smile, was behind bars, held overnight for questioning. No charges, no evidence, just fear. And gossip, and somewhere, far from that cold cell, a boy was on the move, not taken. Not tricked, but running from a life of pain and toward something he couldn't yet name, while the sheriff's office turned cold with suspicion, and Grace Thompson sat in silence behind steel bars. Eli was already far from Redwood. He didn't run because he was kidnapped. He ran because he'd learned the hard way. Kindness doesn't always last, but pain usually does. After slipping out the side door of Mabel's diner, Eli didn't look back. He crossed 2 alleys and cut behind the old church, headed straight toward the edge of town, where trucks came and went, and nobody asked questions. At the far end of Cotton Hollow Market, a line of delivery trucks idled, waiting for dusk. Eli watched them like a stray cat, careful, quiet, calculating, and then he saw it, a flatbed hauling sacks of yams, piled high and barely tied down. The driver had stepped off for a smoke. Without a word, without a plan, Eli climbed aboard and buried himself between the bags, heart pounding so hard it shook his ribs. He didn't know where the truck was headed, only that it was away. And sometimes, away is enough. Hours later, the engine roared to life and the wheels turned beneath him. The boy no one wanted was leaving behind everything. The road was long. He couldn't see where he was going. Only feel the turns, the stops, the Texas wind cutting through the canvas. By sunrise, the truck pulled into a depot on the edge of Dallas. Horns blared, workers shouted. Eli waited, still as a stone, until the driver stepped out for paperwork. Then, quiet as the morning, he slid off the truck bed and into the noise of the big city. Dallas was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Skyscrapers glinted in the sun like knives. People moved fast. No one looked twice at a skinny boy in torn jeans. Eli wandered the streets, hungry again, scared, but strangely, freer than he'd ever been. He slept behind dumpsters, behind buildings, under porches. One night he found a spot behind a tall white house with iron gates and marble steps. It smelled like flowers and money. He curled up under a bush, too tired to think, and let sleep take him. But sleep wouldn't last. That night, long after the porch lights went out, he heard something. Footsteps, slow, bare. Then a man appeared, tall, thin, wrapped in a black robe. His face was hidden, but his voice, low and sharp, sent chills down Eli's spine. The man stood just inside the gate and began speaking, not English, not Spanish. Something darker. He pulled a pouch from his robe and poured red powder on the ground, in a circle, and then he spoke a name. Charity must die. Madam Charity must not live past this week. He repeated it, again. And again. Eli froze, not daring to breathe. The man whispered, chanted, cursed, then vanished into the dark, leaving only the powder behind. Eli stayed hidden till the sky turned gray. The next morning, just after 7 o'clock, the mansion gate creaked open. A shiny black Cadillac began to roll out. Eli jumped in front of it. "Stop!" he shouted. "Don't go through the gate!" Tires screeched. The driver cursed, stepping out, ready to yell. But then, from the back seat, a woman stepped out. Elegant, confident, late 50s. Black dress suit, diamonds on her ears, eyes sharp as razors. "Let him speak," she said, voice calm but firm. Eli stood his ground. "Please, ma'am, don't cross the gate." "Someone did something bad last night. A man in black. He said your name." "Madam Charity. Said you'd die this week." The woman's eyes widened. That's me." For the first time in years, Madam Charity was afraid. She canceled all her meetings, called her pastor. The gate stayed closed. Hours later, 2 church elders arrived with oil, incense, and open Bibles. They prayed, sang, cried out to heaven for protection. Eli sat quietly on the steps. He didn't understand everything, but he knew one thing. He had just saved someone's life, and for the first time in his own, he finally felt like he mattered. Eli had known porches that creaked, belts that stung, and nights where hunger gnawed louder than crickets. But this was something else. He now slept in a soft bed with clean sheets, ate eggs with the yolks still warm, drank milk from a glass, not a carton left in a trash can. And yet, he couldn't shake the feeling it would all disappear. Madam Charity Monroe didn't let that fear fester. She met it head on, every morning, every moment. She didn't hover, but she was there, firm hands, steady voice. A kind of fierce love that didn't ask questions. It just showed up day after day. "We've both seen the worst," she told him once. "But maybe now, we build something better." Eli nodded. He wasn't good with words yet, not the soft kind, not the trusting kind, but he listened, watched. And slowly, like spring after a long Texas freeze, he began to thaw. Days passed, then weeks, then months. Madame Charity enrolled him in a private school, bought him uniforms, tutors, notebooks with his name written neatly across the front. The teachers noticed how fast he picked up numbers. "He sees patterns," one math instructor said, "like the formulas are already waiting in his head." Madame Charity smiled. "I see it too." She started bringing him to meetings, real estate, inventory, salon payrolls. At first he sat quiet in the corner. Then he started asking questions. Good ones. Smart ones. By the time he turned 17, he was managing inventory across 3 businesses. By 19, he was negotiating contracts with men twice his age. But with success came whispers. "That boy," they'd say, "she found him on the street, didn't she? Ain't even her blood. Probably using her." Charity didn't flinch. "I don't need blood to know who my son is." And in the still moments, when the house was quiet and the day's work done, she'd often sit with Eli on the porch, 2 rocking chairs swaying side by side. "You ever think about that day?" she asked once. "The one when you stopped my car?" Eli looked down. "Every day. So do I," she said, her voice thick. That moment changed everything. Eli never asked for more, but Madame Charity had already made up her mind. She met with her lawyer, changed her will, and put Eli's name not just on her businesses, but on her heart. "You saved my life," she said, "and I intend to spend mine making sure you never feel unwanted again." That same month, Grace Thompson sat in a one-room rental behind a bait shop, frying yams in an old cast-iron skillet. Word had long died down in Redwood. The police had cleared her name. The school board had quietly dropped her case. But the damage? It lingered. No school would hire her. No parent would trust her. She had once been a respected teacher. Now, she was a quiet woman folks avoided at the market, a name that brought unease. Yet she kept showing up. Every morning, she'd light the stove, arrange her stand, and smile at the few customers who dared stop. And when a child passed by, looking too thin or too tired, she'd slip an extra slice in their paper tray. "This one's on me," she'd whisper. Her husband Daniel worked nights hauling crates. Her daughter Joyce had finished her degree but couldn't find a job either. They made do with little, but they had each other. "God knows," Grace would say. "And when the time is right, He'll send what we need." One evening, as the sun dipped low and cast orange over the dusty front yard, Eli sat with Madame Charity again, papers in hand. "Everything's signed," she said. "The properties, the accounts. You're ready." Eli didn't respond right away. His eyes were far off, somewhere in memory. "What is it?" she asked. "There's someone I need to see," he said. "Who?" He turned to her, voice steady. "The first person who ever fed me without expecting anything back. A woman named Grace. She changed my life, and she never even knew what happened after." Charity smiled. "Then go tell her. I'll have the car ready." Eli stood, and as the wind stirred the trees around them, he whispered, almost to himself, "It's time to go home." The sun was just beginning to dip low over the hills of Redwood when Eli's black SUV rolled down the same two-lane road he had once walked barefoot as a boy. The town hadn't changed much. The gas station still had the old Coca-Cola sign half rusted through. The diner's window was still cracked in the corner. The wind still carried the scent of dust and fried oil. But Eli, he had changed. Dressed in tailored jeans and a crisp white shirt, he stepped out of the vehicle and stood still for a moment, letting the air hit his face, letting the past catch up. "This place," he whispered, "it still remembers." His driver pointed toward a small food stand off the side of the road. "That her?" the man asked. Eli squinted. A woman stood over a skillet, flipping yams with practiced grace. Her back was slightly bent, her hair pulled into a loose bun. Next to her was a handmade sign, "Fried yams, $2 a cone." "Yeah," Eli said, "that's her." He took a deep breath and walked across the gravel. Grace didn't see him at first. She was busy packing up the last order of the day. Then she heard footsteps. Turned and froze. The boy in front of her wasn't a boy anymore. He stood tall, confident, eyes kind but filled with something deeper. Memory. "Can I help you?" she asked, cautious. "Maybe," he said softly. "Or maybe, I came to help you." She tilted her head. "I'm sorry, I don't—" "It's me," he said. "Eli. The boy from the diner. You gave me breakfast, and a second chance." Grace's hands dropped the tongs. Her knees almost gave way. "Eli?" she gasped. "But how?" He stepped forward and wrapped her in a hug so deep, so steady, she wept right there into his shoulder. "I thought something bad happened to you," she said, voice shaking. "I blamed myself every day. You saved me," he replied. "You did more than anyone ever had. You didn't just give me food. You gave me hope." They sat on a bench beside the stand as the sun dipped behind the trees. Grace's daughter Joyce came out from inside the trailer carrying a tray of yam cones and stopped cold. "Mama?" she asked. "This is Eli," Grace said. "You remember the story." Joyce's eyes widened. "You're the boy?" Eli stood, extended his hand. "I owe your family everything, and I came back to repay it." He reached into his coat pocket and handed Grace an envelope. She opened it, hands trembling. Inside was a cashier's check for more than she'd ever seen in one place. "I want you to rest. To breathe, to live," Eli said. "And there's more. You gave me a place at a table once. I'd like to return the favor." The next morning, a second vehicle arrived from Dallas. Inside were Madame Charity's assistant, an architect, and legal advisors. Grace, Daniel, and Joyce were driven to the city, still confused, but when they turned onto a quiet road near the edge of town, their confusion turned to awe. A newly built school campus stood tall, modern, sunlit, with a bold wooden sign in front, Grace Thompson Academy, a place where kindness begins. Grace fell to her knees. "All this?" she whispered. "For me?" Eli nodded. "You planted the seed. Now watch it bloom." The school had classrooms, a library, dorms for orphans, and a home for Grace and her family built into the staff quarters. "You don't have to fry yams anymore," Eli said, smiling, "unless you just love to." Tears streamed down Grace's face. Daniel wrapped his arms around her. Joyce stood silent, hands covering her mouth. "I always dreamed of opening a school," Grace said, voice cracking. "But I thought that dream died with my job. And my name." "Your name never stopped meaning something," Eli said. "To me, it meant survival." And in that moment, beneath the wide Texas sky, pain turned into peace. The boy who once had no home had returned. Not just as a man, but as a bridge between past and promise. Word traveled fast. In a town like Redwood, it didn't take a headline or a billboard to stir curiosity. All it took was a whisper at the post office and a nod from the pastor. And by the next morning, folks lined the street like it was Founder's Day. They came in boots and button-downs, church dresses and baseball caps, some out of wonder, others out of guilt. At the front of it all stood a woman once shunned, Grace Thompson, now standing straight-backed, hands gently resting on a silk ribbon tied across a freshly built iron gate, her hair pinned neatly. Her eyes misted over. Next to her stood the man no one recognized at first, until they did. Eli. Not the boy in torn jeans and duct-taped shoes. The man, tall, tailored, composed, with the same quiet strength that once made him walk away from everything, now returning to give it all back. "Y'all ready?" he asked gently. Grace nodded. The scissors trembled in her hand. "I never dreamed this," she whispered. "But you planted it," Eli replied. "This is just the harvest." And with one clean snip, the ribbon fell. The crowd erupted in applause. Inside the gate stood Grace Thompson Academy, a stunning two-story school with bright walls, large windows, and hope carved into every brick. The motto read, "Where kindness begins." There was a computer lab, a reading room, a cafeteria that smelled like fresh cornbread and chicken stew, but the heart of the building, a plaque mounted just inside the front door. It read, "In honor of Grace Thompson, who chose compassion when the world chose suspicion, this school exists because she did not walk away." Grace covered her mouth, tears spilling freely. Daniel, her husband, wrapped an arm around her. Joyce stood next to them, eyes shining with pride. "Mama," Joyce said, voice shaking, "look what your kindness grew." That afternoon, alumni, neighbors, even reporters came. They walked the halls, took photos, ate yams from a food truck stationed out front with a sign that read, "Grace's Fry Stand, S 2010, still sizzlin'." But as the sun began to fall, casting long shadows across the yard, another figure appeared. Roy Johnson. Time had weathered him, his beard grayed. His step slower, but his eyes, once hard, were softer now. He walked with a hat in hand, head down. A hush fell over the lawn. Grace saw him first. Her smile faded just a bit, replaced by something quieter, deeper. Eli turned. Their eyes met. "I didn't come for trouble," Roy said, stopping a few feet away. "Heard what y'all built. I wanted to see it, and to say—" He swallowed hard. "I'm sorry for what I said, for what I accused. For not protecting that boy better. I let anger speak for me, and I've been carrying it ever since." Eli studied him. "I don't hate you," he said, "but I remember, and I think that's what matters. Rememberin', so we don't repeat it." Roy nodded, eyes glistening. "You're a better man than I ever was." "I had better people to show me how," Eli replied, glancing at Grace. Roy looked at her too. "Miss Grace, I reckon I owe you more than words." She reached out, touching his forearm. "We've all carried our share of pain, Roy, but mercy still has room at the table." And just like that, something old broke. And something new began. That evening, families stayed to watch the sunset. Kids ran through the courtyard. Teachers sipped lemonade on the porch. Laughter, once lost to this town, returned like an old song. Eli stood by the school gate as lights flickered on behind him. Madame Charity arrived quietly as always. Dressed in deep purple, she walked up beside him. "You did it," she said. "We did," Eli replied. "How does it feel?" He looked out across the campus. "Like redemption," he said. "Like everything came full circle," she smiled, placing a hand on his shoulder. "And now we protect it," he said. "This isn't just a school. It's a lighthouse for kids like I used to be, lost, alone, hungry for more than food." She nodded. "Then let the light keep shining." And as the stars blinked open in the vast Texas sky, Eli stood beneath them, not as a boy with nothing, but as a man who gave back everything. The crowd had gone. The ribbon was cut. The speeches spoken. The cameras tucked away. But inside Grace Thompson Academy, one light still burned. Grace sat alone in the main office, her hands resting on the desk that now bore her name, etched in brass, polished to shine. She stared at the room, and for the first time in a long time, she let it all catch up to her. The classroom window where a 10-year-old boy once refused to go in. The diner booth that sat empty when she returned. The cold metal bars of a jail cell. The silence from her church pew. The frying pan that crackled in shame. And now, the hallway where children's footsteps echoed with laughter. The school that carried her name. The boy who came back. Not just as a man, but as a mission. Her breath hitched as her eyes landed on a letter left on her desk. No envelope, just a page folded in half. She opened it. "Dear Ms. Grace, my name is Jaden. I'm 12. I heard you helped someone when he had nothing. My mom said you were once in trouble for it. That's dumb. You helped him anyway. When I grow up, I want to help people too. My mom said this school is here because of that one time you said, 'Let's fix it.' I hope I get to say that someday too." Grace closed her eyes. Let the words settle deep. That was the moment. Not the applause, not the buildings, not even the plaque on the wall. This was the revelation, that kindness, when given without reason, creates ripples you may never see, but someone always feels. She stood and walked slowly out the front doors. Eli was there, standing near the front steps, hands in his pockets, looking out across the courtyard lit by soft garden lights. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "Didn't want to," she replied. "Too much to think about?" "Too much to be thankful for." They stood side by side in silence for a long while. Then she said, "You know what the real miracle is?" He looked at her. "It wasn't you finding success, or me being cleared, or even this school." She turned to him. "It was that none of it had to happen. And yet, it did. Because one person, one child, believed the world could still be kind." Eli's voice softened. "You gave me that belief. And you proved me right." The night air was still. A soft wind rustled the flags at the gate. Grace took a slow breath. "I used to pray for justice. For all the folks who turned their backs, who accused me, laughed, forgot." Eli nodded. "So did I. But now," she said, "I thank God they were wrong, because their silence made your voice louder. Their coldness made your return warmer." Eli smiled, eyes glassy. "Funny, isn't it?" "What?" "How a plate of scrambled eggs can outlive an accusation." They laughed, a warm, healing kind of laugh that comes only when the wound has truly closed. Across the courtyard, Madame Charity stood on the porch of the staff house. She didn't interrupt, just watched, her arms folded, eyes filled with something close to pride and peace. Grace looked back toward the campus, now lit like a small city in the quiet dark. "Do you think it'll last?" she asked. Eli's voice was steady. "It already has." She nodded. Then whispered, to the sky, to herself, to every student who'd ever walked those halls, "Let this place be proof that one small kindness can echo into forever." And under that wide Texas sky, stars blinking down like old friends, the past finally exhaled its last breath, because the revelation had come full circle. Hope doesn't need to be big, it just needs to be offered. The sun rose soft and amber over Redwood, stretching long shadows across the gravel lot of Grace Thompson Academy. The morning air carried the scent of pine, a hint of coffee, and something else, something deeper: peace. After all the storms, something sacred had settled. Grace stood at the front doors of the school, her hand resting on the handle. Just inside, a new school year waited to begin, laughter waiting to be born, stories waiting to unfold. "You nervous?" Eli asked, stepping beside her holding 2 paper cups of black coffee. She chuckled. "I've been teaching for over 25 years. But today, yeah, a little." "Good," he smiled. "That means it still matters." Behind them, teachers filed in with lesson plans under their arms. Volunteers laid out fresh books in the library, the smell of cinnamon rolls wafted from the kitchen, and across the lot a yellow bus rumbled in, its doors creaking open to a flood of backpacks, sneakers, and new beginnings. Eli watched quietly. He could see himself in those kids, nervous, uncertain, carrying more weight than any child should. "They don't know what it took to build this," he said softly. "They're not supposed to," Grace replied. "They just need to know someone believed they were worth it." They stepped inside together. The hallways glowed with light. The walls were lined with photographs, not of donors, not of awards, but of everyday moments: a teacher helping with math, a cafeteria worker tying a shoe, a librarian reading to a child who didn't speak yet. At the end of the main corridor hung one final plaque, hand-carved in dark oak. "What began with one meal became a lifetime of mercy." Grace read it, then glanced at Eli. "You think they'll remember?" He nodded. "Not all of it, but they'll remember how it felt here." "And how did it feel?" she asked. "Like the first time someone saw me and didn't flinch." The bell rang. Students poured in. Voices filled the building like music, off-key, unscripted, real. Eli and Grace stood at the threshold for a moment longer. Then she whispered, "Full circle," and he replied, "Finally," because that's the thing about kindness. It doesn't vanish. It circles. Quietly, patiently, faithfully. Until one day, it returns, not as applause, but as a legacy. A door that stays open, a name that no longer brings shame, and a future that remembers what others tried to forget. In a world that too often rewards the loudest voices and forgets the quiet ones, this story reminds us of something timeless. That one small act of kindness, a warm plate, a gentle word, a moment of belief, can echo farther than we'll ever see. Grace didn't save a nation. She didn't start a movement. She just noticed a hungry child and chose not to look away. And in doing so, she lit a match that burned through years of shame, silence, and suspicion until it became a beacon. A child who was once invisible became a man who rebuilt the very world that once tried to erase him, not with revenge, but with redemption. And that's the lesson, that kindness isn't weakness, it's a quiet power, one that changes everything, not by force, but by faith. In the end, Grace didn't just change a life. She proved that sometimes the softest voices leave the loudest legacy, and that is a story worth remembering. What would you have done if you were in Grace's shoes, helping a child that no one else would, even if it meant risking your own reputation? Have you ever experienced or witnessed a quiet act of kindness that changed everything? Share your story below. We'd love to hear it.